Welcome to another episode of Quick Question with top producing Twin Cities Realtor Dave Oswald. Now, join Dave as he answers your questions about residential real estate.
I'm often asked questions about appraisals. It's a broad subject with a lot of answers, and I thought that today probably the best thing to do was to bring in an expert. So I did. To my right is Bob Zvanovec. Bob is the owner of Swan Appraisals. Bob's a former banker who got into appraising over 20 years ago. And today you have a lot of clients and you do appraisals for commercial properties and residential properties. You kind of know appraising inside and out, don't you?
Well, I've been around long enough.
Yeah, well, and he's very good at what he does. So the question that I'm often asked is, when a person is buying a home, how does that appraisal work? How does an appraiser place a value on my home? What do they really do? So, Bob, take it away.
Well, it's kind of a long process, but very briefly, we go out and inspect the property that we're appraising to begin with. We look at the inside and the outside of the home, measure the property to get the size of the property, square footage, look at all areas of the interior of the home for the quality of construction and the condition of the property, finished areas, basement, main floor, second floor, garage, any other additional properties or buildings on the property. The land, views, if it be wooded or if it has a pond view or lakeshore or whatever. So all of those things we do during the inspection, and then we take all the information back to the office and we start to look for comparable properties that have recently sold. And then we look at those properties, maybe 6, 7, 8, 10 properties that have sold that we think are comparable. And then we'll look at them and see how they kind of shake out in comparison to the property we're appraising. Make adjustments for differences. If one property has an additional feature, they get a plus, such as maybe 2 fireplaces over 1, or maybe they have kitchen updates, or maybe ours has a superior feature, maybe a 3-car garage versus a 2. So there are pluses and minus adjustments to each of the comparables, and then we arrive at an adjusted value based on each of the comparables.
Those adjustments, is there a certain price for a 3-car garage versus a 2-car garage when you calculating these differences?
Well, that's where things get a little bit interesting, Dave, because everybody's opinion of adjustments can be a little different. It's all based on market data. In other words, we're to compare as much as we can based on property sales. What is the actual value of a third bay of a garage? How much is the market willing to pay for that and the final ending sale price? So we're continuously kind of massaging that type, the adjustment criteria, and say certain areas would have a higher value for, say, a third bay of a garage than other areas. Like in Minneapolis, South Minneapolis, the third bay garage wouldn't have that much value because the homes are small. Most have 1 or 2 bays at the most.
Yeah.
Whereas in Lakeville, if you don't have a third bay garage, it becomes kind of a penalty to the property.
Interesting. So you take these 7 or 8 or 9 different properties. Now, usually when I see an appraisal, there's not that many properties on there. You then narrow this down to the top 3,
exactly.
4, 5?
Exactly. I will always use a minimum of 3, and the other thing we have to do is to bracket the property. We'll have to have 1 higher and 1 lower so that we can approach value from both ends of the spectrum, the highs and the lows, and then we try to get one that's very, very similar. But the underwriters for mortgage transactions always require a bracketing.
Do underwriters drive you crazy?
Well, they.
I'm sure there's none of them watching my Quick Question blog.
They have a job to do, and I respect that.
That's great. And how far back are you looking for recent sales? Do you have I've heard talk about a radius of area and a time frame. How far back can you go?
Underwriting guidelines allow us to go back 12 months, but they prefer to have comps within the most recent 6 months.
Okay.
And we try to get them, the best sales are a month old, or 2 or 3, because the market is continuously changing, so you want to have the comparables as close to current date as you can.
And then how about geography? How far out
The best sales, again, would be the properties that are next door, behind, and across the street. So if I've got those 4 that have sold, I'd probably use those. But if you don't, then you just the radius just expands from there until
Yeah.
you find enough
Right.
that you feel you can justify the value.
Wow. So it's a lot of research. I oftentimes get calls from appraisers that are asking me about a house that I sold a year ago or 6 months ago because they need to use it as a comp and they've got some questions. I imagine you do the same thing.
I think the reporting from the realtors has been excellent in the last 2 to 3 years especially. A lot more pictures on the MLS so that we can evaluate the comparables, just by looking at the pictures. It used to be, back before that, they'd put one picture of the exterior of the home, so you'd always have to call the realtor, what was the interior finish like? Was it updated? Did they have, updated kitchens, baths? But now, probably less calls than it used to be.
Let me ask you another question. And this is a question that I'm often asked, and I don't really have a good answer, even though I've met with the county assessor, and I have a good friend who's an appraiser, you, and this is the question. And it oftentimes comes up when people are refinancing their home, and they have an appraisal. And then they look at their county assessor, and the assessor says their home is worth X, but the appraisal typically comes in a little higher. Why would an appraisal be higher for a bank, for a lender, than what the county says the property is worth?
Well, Dave, that generally occurs when we're in an increasing market like we are now, because the assessors, they do the same process essentially that the appraiser does, but they do it on a mass scale. One assessor is can be responsible for thousands of properties. But they will use market data or comparables. Generally, I believe it's between October and October from the prior year for their January 14 assessment. They would have used comparables from October of
2012.
Of 2012 is where they would start. So back in October of 2012, you can remember that the property values were significantly lower than they are now. So what we'll see is their comps are a little bit dated, a little bit further back.
Right.
But their requirements, I believe, they're supposed to be within, I believe it's 90 to 105% of market value for state guidelines. So they try to hit that, but conversely, in a declining market like we had 3 years ago, the assessor's values tended to be a little bit too high.
Yeah.
In certain situations. We saw quite often.
Excellent answers. Thanks, Bob, for being with us today on Quick Question. As a matter of fact, we've got more questions, so watch your YouTube channel for Dave Oswald Homes and look for another Quick Question with Bob Zvanovec, because we've got more questions coming. Thanks again for joining us today on Quick Question. We'll see you next time.
Have a quick question about residential real estate? Email it to us at quickquestion@daveoswaldhomes.com.